High above the jungles of Central America, the Maya built cities of stone and temples that touched the sky. But beneath their pyramids, rituals of blood were carried out. Rituals were beating human. Hearts were torn from living chests and raised toward the heavens. To the Maya, this was not cruelty, it was survival. For without blood, the sun itself might die, and the world would fall into eternal darkness. Deep within the jungles of Central America, an empire rose that defied the wilderness. The Maya carved cities of stone where no cities should have stood, grand temples, sprawling plazas, pyramids that reached toward the heavens. Their architecture pierced the sky, their calendars tracked the stars, and their priests claimed to hold the secrets of time itself. To the Maya, the world was more than earth and sky. It was a living cycle, fragile and eternal, held together by forces unseen. The sun was not a distant star, but a god in constant battle against darkness. Each sunrise was a victory, each sunset a warning. And the Maya believed that without their devotion, without their offerings, the sun might one day fail to rise. Life in these cities pulsed with ritual. Markets bustled with traders carrying cacao, jade, and obsidian. Warriors marched proudly, their bodies painted in dazzling colors, their heads adorned with feathers that shimmered like fire. Farmers toiled under the scorching sun, their sweat feeding the maize that sustained the empire. And high above them all, priests stood atop stone pyramids, gazing at the horizon, measuring the movement of stars, as if listening to the heartbeat of the universe itself. But this heartbeat demanded fuel. The Maya believed the gods who shaped the world had sacrificed their own blood to bring life. In return, humans owed a debt paid not in gold or words, but in blood. And not just blood spilled in battle, but the heart itself, the very essence of life. Thus, in the very heart of these shining cities, where knowledge and faith intertwined, a darker truth lingered. Behind the grandeur of temples and the brilliance of calendars was a belief so powerful, so terrifying, that it shaped the destiny of an empire. The gods were hungry, and the Maya would feed them. The sun, the stars, the very continuation of life, everything depended on sacrifice. And soon, the beating drums of ritual would call for hearts to be torn from living chests, raised high toward the heavens, and offered to the burning sky. To the Maya, the universe was born from sacrifice. In their sacred stories, the gods themselves had given blood to shape the earth, to raise the sky, to set the sun ablaze. Creation was not a gift freely given, it was a debt, one that mankind was forever bound to repay. At the center of this belief stood the sun god, forever locked in a struggle against darkness. Each dawn was a battle won, each night a reminder that the world balanced on the edge of destruction. The Maya feared that if the gods grew hungry, the sun might falter, the stars might dim, and the cycle of life would collapse into endless night. Blood was the most sacred offering, for within it lived Shulalva, divine essence of life. To spill blood was to share a spark of divinity. To offer a heart was to return the very fire that kept the cosmos alive. Without sacrifice, the gods would weaken. Without the gods, the world would end. Priests taught that every drop of blood, every heart lifted to the sky, was not death, it was nourishment. The gods consumed the life force, and in exchange, they allowed crops to grow, rains to fall, and the sun to rise once more. This belief was not superstition, it was survival. It justified the rituals that would come, rituals in which living men and women were transformed into vessels of cosmic fuel. Their deaths were not seen as cruelty, but as an honor, a sacred duty to keep the world turning. And so, the Maya lived under the gaze of gods who hungered, gods who demanded blood. To deny them was unthinkable. To obey was the price of existence, itself not. Everyone was destined for sacrifice, but for those who were, fate was inescapable. The Maya believed that only the strongest, the purest, and the most worthy could be offered to the gods. Their lives were not wasted, they were transformed into bridges between the human world and the divine. Many victims were prisoners of war, captured in bloody battles that stretched across jungles and mountains. To defeat an enemy was glory, but to capture one alive was greater still. For to offer a rival's heart to the gods was the highest proof of power. Warriors returned to their cities not only with spoils, but with living offerings destined for the temple steps. But not all sacrifices were enemies. Among the Maya, there were times when slaves, children, and even nobles were chosen. Legends speak of kings and queens who gave their own blood in ritual, piercing their tongues, ears, and even genitals, to honor the gods. In rare moments, a warrior might step forward willingly, offering himself as a sacred gift, believing death in ritual ensured rebirth among the stars. Once chosen, the victims were prepared with ceremony. They were dressed in fine garments, their faces painted with sacred symbols. They were paraded before the people, not as condemned, but as honored vessels carrying life itself. Some walked in silence, others wept, and a few lifted their heads proudly, believing their sacrifice would keep the sun burning in the sky. For the Maya, the chosen were not merely victims, they were offerings. Their hearts were not seen as flesh, but as fuel. And soon, the beating of drums would summon them to the stone altar, where gods awaited their final breath. The day of sacrifice began long before the sun rose. Drums echoed through the city, low and steady, like the heartbeat of the earth itself. Smoke curled from burning incense, filling the air with the scent of copal, thick and sweet. As if to call the gods down from the heavens, crowds gathered in the plazas, thousands of faces turned toward the towering pyramid. They waited in silence, knowing they were about to witness the act that kept the universe alive. Children clutched their mothers' hands, warriors stood proudly, and priests whispered chants that had been passed down for generations. At the summit of the pyramid, the chosen victim was led to the stone altar. His body was painted in sacred patterns, his head adorned with feathers that shimmered in the sunlight. To the people below, he was no longer a man, he was already halfway to the gods. Priests, clad in jaguar skins and masks of death, circled the altar. Their chants rose with the drums, faster and louder, until the air itself seemed to tremble. The high priest raised an obsidian blade, sharp as lightning, black as night. He lifted it to the sky, offering it first to the sun, then brought it down in one swift motion. The crowd gasped as the chest was opened. With practiced precision, the priest reached inside, pulled out the still-beating heart, and held it high above his head. Blood streamed down his arms, glistening in the sun. The drums stopped. For one breathless moment, the entire city stood, in silence, watching the heart pulse in the priest's hands. Then the chant erupted again, louder, triumphant. The heart was lifted toward the blazing sun. Its life force offered as fuel for the eternal struggle between light and darkness. Smoke, drums, krizit, all rose together in a storm of devotion. The body, now lifeless, was rolled down the pyramid steps, a sacrifice completed, a cycle renewed. To the Maya, this was not death, it was life itself, given so that the sun would rise tomorrow, and so the ritual ended, but its echo lingered. For in every sacrifice, the Maya believed, the gods were fed, and the universe was saved if only for another day. To the Maya, blood was not just liquid coursing through veins, it was life itself, the essence that bound humanity to the gods. Every drop shed in sacrifice carried cosmic weight. It was fuel, nourishment, the sacred energy that powered the sun, the stars, and the endless cycles of time. Their world was a delicate balance, forever threatened by chaos. The sun's daily journey across the sky was not guaranteed. It had to be sustained. Without offerings, without hearts beating in its honor, the Maya believed the sun would weaken, falter, and eventually fail to rise. Darkness would swallow the world, and the gods themselves might abandon creation. This belief transformed sacrifice into something greater than cruelty. It became a sacred duty. To the Maya, offering human life was not an act of barbarity, but of cosmic responsibility. By cutting flesh and spilling blood, they were not killing, they were feeding the very forces that made life possible. Bloodletting rituals reinforced this truth. Priests, nobles, and even kings would pierce their own skin, drawing blood with stingray spines, obsidian shards, or ropes of thorns dragged across the tongue. These offerings reminded the gods that their children remained loyal. If the gods themselves had bled to shape the world, then humans too must bleed to keep it alive. In this way, sacrifice was a mirror of creation. Just as the gods had torn themselves apart to bring forth the sun and the earth, so too must humans give of themselves. Every ritual, every drop of blood, every heart raised to the sky renewed that ancient covenant. To the outsider, it was horror. To the Maya, it was salvation. Without sacrifice, there would be no dawn, no harvest, no rain, no stars. The universe would wither in silence. And so, each altar became a lifeline, each blade a bridge between mortals and the divine. The blood spilled was not wasted, was transformed into cosmic fuel, igniting the eternal fire of the sun. Sacrifice was not always a solemn, shadowed act. For the Maya, it was also woven into festivals of music, color, and celebration. Entire cities would come alive on these sacred days, when blood offerings were paired with dances, feasts, and games meant to honor the gods. The plazas filled with throngs of people. Merchants sold food wrapped in maize leaves. Children chased each other through the crowd. And musicians struck their drums and flutes in rhythms that seemed to echo the heartbeat of the earth. The air shimmered with smoke from incense and the scent of roasted cacao, mingling with the nervous excitement of the masses who knew they were about to witness something divine. At the heart of the festival stood the pyramid, its steps draped in banners of crimson and gold. Priests ascended slowly, their bodies painted in symbols of death and rebirth. Behind them, the chosen captives, often warriors taken in battle, were paraded before the crowd, not as criminals, but as honored vessels destined to walk between worlds. As the rituals unfolded, the atmosphere shifted. Drums grew louder, chants more urgent, until the moment of sacrifice brought the festival to its peak. Hearts were raised to the heavens, blood spilled onto sacred stone, and the people erupted into cheers. To them, this was not tragedy, which triumph, a victory over the darkness that forever threatened to consume their world. When the ritual ended, the festival resumed. Dances continued late into the night, torches lighting the plazas as laughter mingled with prayer. The sacrifice had renewed the bond between mortals and gods. For another cycle, the sun would rise, the rains would fall, and the world would endure. Among the Maya, games were never merely entertainment, they were echoes of cosmic struggles. The sacred ball game, played on stone courts flanked by towering walls, was the most symbolic of all. It was more than sport. It was a reenactment of the eternal battle between life and death, sun and darkness, gods and men. Two teams faced each other, using only their hips, elbows, and knees to strike a heavy rubber ball through stone hoops high above the court. Every bounce, every strike, was loaded with meaning. The game was not just about winning, it was about channeling the myths of creation, where the hero twins of Maya legend had once faced the lords of the underworld in a deadly match to secure the survival of the world. Crowds gathered to watch, their chants rolling like thunder. The stakes were far beyond glory. In certain rituals, the losing team or sometimes the winning one, depending on the ceremony, was destined for sacrifice. The ballgame was thus both a spectacle and a ritual of offering, where human lives became part of a grand cosmic performance to those who played. Stepping onto the court was stepping into the realm of gods. Each strike of the ball was a prayer, each fall to the ground a reminder of mortality. And when the game ended, the chosen ones met their fate, not as victims, but as participants in a sacred drama, their blood ensuring that the cycles of time would continue unbroken. The ball game was not only a sport, it was life, death, and eternity, compressed into a single contest. When the Spanish conquistadors first set foot in Maya lands, they expected gold, conquest, and the spread of their faith. What they did not expect was the sight of rituals that shook even hardened soldiers to their core. From the plazas of towering cities like Chichen Itza and Mayopan, the Spaniards watched in disbelief as the Maya gathered for their great festivals. At first, they marveled at the splendor of the painted temples, the processions of dancers, the music that rose like a heartbeat from drums and conch shells. But fascination turned to horror when the rituals reached their climax. Chroniclers describe how the captives were led up the steep pyramid steps, their bodies painted in bright colors, their faces calm or resigned. Priests, wielding obsidian blades sharper than steel, opened their chests and raised still-beating hearts to the heavens. The crowd erupted in cheers as blood spilled down the stone steps, staining them red. To the Maya, it was sacred. To the Spaniards, it was unspeakable. Some conquistadors, like Bernal Diaz del Castillo, wrote of their revulsion at the sight of idols fattened with blood. Two men steeped in Christian faith, the Maya rituals were proof of demonic influence, practices that had to be stamped out. They could not comprehend that for the Maya, sacrifice was not cruelty, but duty, a cosmic necessity to feed the gods and keep the universe alive. This clash of worldviews would soon fuel conquest. The Spaniards condemned the rituals, destroying temples, burning codices, and forcing conversion under threat of death. What had once been a sacred duty for the Maya became a justification for their subjugation. Yet even as they tried to erase these practices, the Spanish accounts preserved them in writing. Through their horrified eyes, modern historians glimpsed the depth of the Maya's devotion rituals, shocking to outsiders, but vital to a people who believed that without blood, the sun itself might cease to rise. For the Maya, sacrifice ensured the survival of the cosmos. For the Spanish, it was proof of savagery. And in that chasm of understanding, an entire civilization began to fall. Today, the temples of the Maya stand silent. The great ball courts lie in ruins, their stone hoops casting shadows on grass-grown plazas. The pyramids, once stained with blood and alive with chanting, now echo only with the sound of wind and the whispers of history. And yet, the legacy of Maya sacrifice has not vanished. It lingers, carved into stone, etched into myth, and woven into the identity of a people whose culture endures. To modern eyes, the practice of tearing out hearts to feed the gods seems brutal, even unimaginable. But for the Maya, it was the very thread holding their universe together. Sacrifice was not murder, it was renewal. It was an act of cosmic balance, ensuring that the sun would rise, the rains would fall, and the corn, the very lifeblood of their civilization, would grow. The stories survive in glyphs, codices, and oral traditions passed down across centuries. Legends of the hero twins, who descended into the underworld to face trials and defeat death itself, remain central to Maya identity. These myths remind us that to the Maya, life and death were not opposites, but partners in a grand cycle, each feeding the other. Archaeologists, uncovering temple murals and ballgame courts, see these rituals not only as bloodshed but as profound religious expressions. Even today, in parts of Central America, echoes of ancient sacrifice live on, not in human offerings, but in symbolic rituals of bloodletting, incense, and prayer. The belief in reciprocity with the gods, the duty to give so that life may continue, still resonates. The Spanish tried to erase these traditions, branding them barbaric, but in doing so, they also preserved them, recording in shocked detail what they witnessed. And so, paradoxically, the horror of the conquistadors became the survival of Maya memory. The ruins of Chichen Itza, Tikal, and Copan stand as monuments not only to Maya engineering and artistry, but to a worldview where blood was the bridge between humans and the divine. The Maya's story reminds us of a truth as old as time. Civilizations rise and fall, but their beliefs, however alien they may seem, leave marks that endure far beyond their empires. The sun still rises, as it did for the Maya, and in its light, the memory of blood and sacrifice still burns.